With people stuck at home in 2020, pet ownership jumped big time. It created a global boom in the sale of pet supplies and pet food. In fact, last year in 2021, pet food production in North America grew by almost 13%, and that is a lot. So today, we're talking about how home improvement giant Lowe's has announced a pilot with Petco for Petco store in stores to meet this new pet supply demand. And we're going to be asking the question, has pet ownership reached a plateau? Plus, Versace plans for nearly 100 new stores around the world. All that and more right now on Everything We Know About Retail. Hello, my name is James Cook. I'm coming to you live from wintry Indiana, where I have a border collie named Winnie, and I also have a flock of chickens that don't have names. You don't just get too attached to chickens that way. At least I don't. Ebere Anokute is coming to us from New York.
I am, and I have never had a pet, and I really think that I lack compassion for animals as a result.
Eberry's dead inside, folks. And Taylor Coyne is in Los Angeles.
Where I've got a 17-year-old diabetic cat who loves Fancy Feast and insulin. Talk about a ton of compassion for an animal. Her name is Grace.
Grace is almost old enough to vote.
She sure is.
Well, you're watching Everything We Know About Retail, where we tell all of you everything we know about retail, 3 things at a time. So, Taylor, what do you know about retail?
Yeah, so the first thing that I know about retail is that Lowe's wants in on all of these pet sales. And from me alone, I am fueling this. Granted, I've been fueling this for the past 17 years, but lots of Fancy Feast and lots of insulin over the years. But so like I said, Lowe's wants in on all the pet sales. So we have a new partnership starting soon. Actually, I think it's at the end of this month. They're going to start rolling out a Petco store within Lowe's stores. As we know, we have talked about this a lot. These two sectors have performed extremely well during the pandemic. We spent a lot of time at home. That translates to home improvement projects. We've also needed companionship. And that corresponds to adopting the pets and, buying all of their corresponding needs. So according to DateX, which has been covering a ton of rent collections throughout the pandemic. And they also have all of the sales data. So the light gray are 2019, which is just, good comparison year, as we know, before the pandemic. And then black is everything from 2021. In Q1 of 2021, sales were up 14.8% from 2019. So it wasn't just a pandemic year. I mean, I know we're still in it, but all of these elevated sales continued into 2021. The variance between 2019 and 2021 never dipped below 8%. Again, we are spending a lot on our pets. So why rock the boat if things are going well? Well, it is hard to compete with such profitable years, and you need to stay relevant. You need to stay on top of things. So rising inflation, potentially, hopefully in the end of Omicron soon, Lowe's is like, all right, people are probably going to spend money on vacations, going out. So we need to stay relevant. In both Lowe's and Petco's, their shares have fallen a little bit this year. So what do? Well, we get together and make a partnership. They are clearly not the first ones, but I think this is a great idea. This is what a mocked up version of what this Petco within a Lowe's store is going to look like. You can buy dog food. You can buy cat litter. You can visit with a vet, which I think we can go back to this. I think that is a great idea. You can also drop your dog off for grooming, and all while shopping for your home products. And we've talked about this before. This is great for Petco. This expands their footprint without any of the real estate liabilities, all of that effort, while also tapping into the Lowe's consumer, and, vice versa. Lowe's just gets all of those people who are into their pets, as pet sales have, just gone up everywhere. So it really gets them in on the game too. So, it's a win-win for both of them. Pilot program starts in San Antonio. Actually, it wasn't even later this month. It's early this month, with 14 additional locations planned in Texas, North Carolina, and South Carolina, all by the end of March. Assuming it goes well, I anticipate we will see many more of these. The Petcos, they're going to be about 1,000 square feet. They're going to be located in the front of the store, and at least one staff member will be a Petco staffer, and then supplemented with Lowe's employees. So, I think it's great. Good for Lowe's too. Lowe's has really been like on top of it. Again, hard to stay. You want to stay relevant after being so successful, but they've like launched some new categories. They do home decor. I really like this one. They have, maybe it's because I do have a senior cat, but they've launched an initiative to sell and install items that allow seniors to age in their home, rather than having to go to a senior care facility. Grace is a senior cat. She's actually a super senior. She's that old. She is a super senior.
Wow.
They're also doing fitness equipment also. So, and this is Petco. This is a great expanding their physical, like I said, but, trying to compete with Chewy, which is that online service that is also, done incredibly well. So I think it's great. And you both know tons of stores within the stores, right? We've got Target and Ulta, Apple, Disney, Kohl's and Sephora. I didn't know what this one, but Kroger and Bed Bath & Beyond. So it's not stores within a store, but Kroger's like selling Bed Bath & Beyond merchandise. So, yeah,
a
get all
lot
your
of stores
pet and home needs.
A lot of stores. So some of those will be successful, some won't. The selling pet food especially, but just the whole pet supplies at Lowe's just seems to make so much sense. So often, people, homeowners, suburbanites are going there on the weekend to pick up a whole bunch of stuff. And they're like, oh yeah, I need dog food too. Just throw that in that huge cart, that you're pushing around, filling up with stuff. Yeah, I think it's a smart move, and I think it'll be successful.
Yeah, 100%. And even, I would have to assume you're doing curbside, that you would allow some of those Petco pickups for curbside too. Just kind of thinking about all the channels. I don't know for that for sure, but I would think that would be, as you're scrolling the website of doing a curbside pickup. Oh yeah, great. I can also get that, like you said, gigantic bag of dog food and someone will bring it to my car. So
what do the statistics look like, Taylor, for pet supply growth?
So last year, pet food production grew by 12.7% in North America. Obviously, this just like global pet growth, all driven by the pandemic. Again, we needed companionship, especially for those younger generations. So Gen Z, apparently, according to a 2020 survey, it was like 16% of Gen Z got a new pet because of COVID.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Which is interesting, because you would think it was more of like an older generation thing. No, but the older people already had the pet.
That's,
right?
I think that's what it is. It like spurred earlier pet ownership. I know when I was like in my early 20s, there's no way that I wanted a pet. I like to go visit other people's pets, but that was a level of responsibility I was just not ready for yet. So, but I think that's interesting.
Yeah, I definitely observed anecdotally, just like on social media throughout the pandemic. I'm like, everyone has a pet now, right? Everyone is showing their brand new kitten or their brand new puppy or their rabbit or whatever, like in a way that I'd never seen before. And it took a while for me to, connect the dots as far as, we need companionship and we're at home a lot more. So it's nice to have, someone there with us. Obviously, it makes perfect sense why we're seeing this sort of growth. But do you think this growth is going to last, Taylor? Like, do you think the outlook for this sector is strong?
I think it's strong, but you do have to imagine like it will plateau, which I guess also kind of in terms of like shares falling, these company shares falling kind of makes sense. And not to be really Debbie Downer, even though I feel like we've, again, come to a better place. But I remember there was a news story of like a lot of the pet adoption returns, which made me very sad of, again, you kind of maybe were too young and you were lonely and you got this dog and you're like, this is too much. I can't actually do it. But I was stressed out and didn't think this thought through. I'm hoping that's not where we're at anymore. So yes, I think that all plateaus. But again, I think that's why you do a partnership like this. That helps you. You have to stay relevant. You can't compete with those high years. Hopefully we don't continue to repeat these past 2 years for eternity. So, you got to pivot Stay relevant.
There is a demographic trend though that I think really bodes well, and that's new childbirth rates are going down. Young couples are less likely to have a kid, and when they do have kids, they're having fewer kids. But there's that whole segment of people who, if you don't have a kid, I feel like maybe I'm going out on a limb here, but you're gonna treat your pet like a kid, and you're gonna spend a lot more on it, right?
Fair. That's very fair.
Anecdotally, I have two friends in very long committed relationships, do not want children, both have dogs, and like that dog is one of the best cared for pets, and they are, they're like, yeah, this is what I want. I am into my dog, and that is all I need, and I am happy. Like,
Right.
good, great. So I don't know. Again, who knows anecdotally, but I see, real life examples of what you just said, James.
Absolutely.
So we'll see. We'll see what happens with pets over time. But until then, Ebere, what do you know about retail?
Well, Taylor, this is the second thing that we know about retail, and we are going to pivot from the home improvement and the pet category and talk a little bit more about luxury again, right? We're still staying in the vein of, categories that did really well throughout the pandemic, right? We mentioned that luxury has been one of the bright spots throughout the pandemic when it comes to retail. As a result, as I've said probably 8 million times now, of the, profile of jobs that were lost in this pandemic versus other pandemic, the high net worth office using employees remain stable throughout the pandemic, and as a result we're able to patronize these luxury businesses, and we've seen that turn into a slew of leasing activity. Here right now, I'll show you this example. We showed this last week, but this is new luxury leases in New York City in 2021. And we know that New York City acts as a bellwether for the rest of retail markets throughout the country. So the changes or the trends that we see happen here, we can almost certainly expect to see them happen throughout the country as well. So we see a lot of luxury leases were signed, and that's definitely been one of the most active categories throughout the pandemic. So we're talking today about Capri Holdings, right? Capri Holdings is the parent company of Michael Kors, Jimmy Choo, and Versace. And it was formed back in 2019 when Michael Kors bought Versace for just over $2 billion, right? And they have had a very, very successful end of 2021, right? So one thing I'll say right now, I think when we talk about Q3, Q4 for us, I think retail uses different time markers for those periods. So just to say, all the articles I read were talking about Q3, but they were discussing the period up until December 25th. So Q3, but we're talking about the holiday season. And throughout the holiday season, Capri Holdings reported a 23% increase in sales for that period of 2021. They saw $1.6 billion in total revenue in Q3, and that is higher than the amount that they saw in 2020 and also in 2019 pre-pandemic.
Wow.
With about $1 billion in gross profit. So this is not no small thing, right? This is definitely substantial gains that they made throughout the pandemic. And the darling of all of this has been Versace. So here we have the most recent Versace campaign featuring the Hadid sisters, smiling, looking, lovely, of course. Sales at Versace specifically were up 29%, but all three brands did show increases, Michael Kors and Jimmy Choo as well. But they are focusing a lot of their efforts going forward on Versace because they think that it has the most potential to continue to grow, right? Obviously, they want to capitalize on these gains that they made throughout the pandemic and grow, at a reasonable pace, while also being careful not to oversaturate the market. They had an investor meeting, I believe yesterday, where the CEO made it clear that as excited as they are, they want to be sure that they continue to attract consumers as opposed to, shoving their products in their faces, because they think that'll just lead to a better outcome in the long term. So it's really encouraging to see that they are going to put a lot of this newfound capital into their physical stores. So they announced yesterday as well that they plan to increase their store count to 300 stores throughout the world, right? Right now they have about 212, so that makes up for the nearly 100 stores that they're going to open. They didn't set a time frame. They didn't say in the next year or the next 2 years. That's just something that they want to do in the coming years. And they've also announced that they have been renovating their existing stores for the past 6 months, and plan to complete that renovation over the course of the next 24 months. So it is, to me, really, really encouraging to see another major retailer. Obviously, Versace, Michael Kors, and Jimmy Choo are not digitally native, right? These are, legacy luxury brands, but they see that the way forward, in addition to these, digitally native brands, is with physical stores. So I think that's really encouraging news to see. And it definitely ties into what we've been talking about. Again, like the chart that I showed about luxury leasing picking up, we can definitely expect to see that. And although there are currently, thinking about New York, there is already at least one, maybe two Versace stores. I wouldn't be surprised if they, if they're right now on Fifth Avenue and Madison Avenue, then they would go to Soho. Or if they're in Fifth Avenue and Soho, then they'll, maybe go to Madison Avenue, or maybe meatpacking. And there's a lot of availability in meatpacking. Pricing is down. So there's a lot of opportunity here for them to lease some of this space and continue to expand their footprint, which seems to be in line with how they plan to grow. So very encouraging here. But I have a question for you all that's kind of similar to what we just asked with the pet food, with the pet supply sort of question, which is, do we think that these gains that the luxury sector is seeing is an overcorrection from, the lows of 2020? Obviously, I mentioned that when it comes to Capri Holding sales or total revenue in 2021, it was higher than the same period in 2020 and 2019. But do we think that, this general boom in luxury, or this recovery, is an overcorrection, or do you think that luxury leasing is going to be one of the dominant categories for years to come?
I think it's certainly going to, just speaking about Versace, like the announcement of 100 new global stores.
Mm-hmm.
First off, real smart that they didn't put a timeline on that. It's just like, oh, we're going to get to it.
At some point.
But it is an understanding that they recognize that as the pandemic recedes, people are going to get back out in the physical retail, and but they're not quite sure on what the timing of that's going to be. So it's like, oh, we're going to get to it. But I mean, as far as the leaders of urban retail leasing, as far as like who's going to pay the highest price per square foot,
sure,
it's going to be luxury leading the way. It might not be the biggest overall retail category in America, but as we come out of the pandemic, as people get back to the city, those are going to be the retailers that are paying the biggest rents on the hottest streets and the best locations, no doubt about it.
Yeah, luxury doesn't go anywhere. I feel like we've learned that also over time. I think luxury is also done well, right? Because it's about the experience. I am going to the store. I am spending a lot of money on this thing. It's like, what is it called? It's the lipstick effect, right? You, if you're kind of down, if you buy a new lipstick, it makes you feel better. Granted, the lipstick is it's actually now a bad example, because the point is that a lipstick isn't that expensive, but it makes you feel a lot better. Sure. But I feel like it's kind of similar in the sense of like, I can't go out and do all of the things. So I'm maybe spending less money on X, Y, and Z. So I'm going to buy this like fancy bag, and it is going to make me feel good for a long time because it is so special. And that feeling like never goes away. So I think that that's here. I will say, and what I think is interesting, granted this was a little bit more of malls, but right, Michael Kors had an issue of being too much in department stores. It was too readily available. There was too much discounting happening. So it, took away from that, I guess, status of the brand. Not that I think that happens from Versace opening 80 stores, but I will be curious, how many stores are you planning for New York? Or are you trying to open a Versace in a new market? Is it a new, emerging market in Asia or Europe also, versus oversaturating the New York market with Versace's? So I'll be curious to see what happens and where they end up choosing.
I think it is going to be a lot of, maybe some Chinese cities that, aren't even on our radar, but are, have a higher, bigger population as like greater Los Angeles. And it's just, there's a lot of places like that. There's a lot of room for growth there. Exactly. Taylor, to your point of this lipstick idea, I think that a lot of luxury retailers actually do appeal in that regard. So you go into the store and you see a handbag that might be $10,000, $20,000, and next to it might be a scarf that's $100. And you're like, oh, okay, well, I can buy into this luxury universe. And you're still paying $100 for a scarf, which is a lot, but compared to the bag, which is tens of thousands of dollars,
right.
you're and of course the profit margin, even if the scarf is handmade in Italy, the profit margin on that scarf is pretty solid.
It's huge. But also to that, right? It's like a gateway. It's a gateway product. You get this scarf and then you like feel it. You're like, oh, this is how I can feel about this like very special scarf. Well, let me get a belt. The belt is like $400, but you know, you just like keep going because you get addicted to this like feeling.
It's the scarf and then the belt and then the wallet. And then maybe in a couple years, you know, we talk about a shirt. Right. Take it a step at a time to break into that luxury category. But no, I agree with what both of you said. And even, you know, thinking about what makes these, you know, urban prime corridors, for the most part, it's, you know, some of them have different personalities, but in a lot of ways, it's the, you know, profile of the retailers that choose to go there. So I definitely think maybe we could be on the cusp of another. I don't want to, you know, be, you know, too grand, but maybe we could see, you know, some more prime corridors emerging, like you said, when they go to new markets, or even within, you know, markets that already exist. We could see other corridors start to gain more prominence when, you know, these luxury retailers decide to go there and lease space up there, because I mean, that's what made these corridors prime in the first place. So definitely, you know, encouraging trends to see. Obviously, we love people opening stores. We love that more than anything. And it's great to see luxury capitalizing on their gains and putting it right back into the ecosystem. So with that, James, tell me, what do you know about retail?
Well, here is the third thing that we know about retail. It is time for a special edition of a new segment I've decided to call The Retail Court. We're going to talk about a current legal case in the retail real estate world. And, you know, we should do it like debate team, where I assign one of you to pro and one of you to con, but maybe we'll just jump in and see what we think. So you guys our viewers are aware, at least those in the US, that when retail tenants negotiate a lease with the landlord, they'll negotiate oftentimes exclusivity clauses. So the landlord agrees not to lease out space in the center to one of your competitors. So I'm a dentist and the landlord agrees I'm the only dentist in this center. That's a great traditional example. So a recent report in the Wall Street Journal is about a shopping center in Las Vegas where the initial tenant here is called Cafe Rio. It's a Mexican fast casual chain similar to Chipotle in the Chipotle universe. They negotiated in their lease that no other retailer in this center could make more than 10% of its sales from, quote, Mexican or Tex-Mex food. So directly next door to Cafe Rio opens a new restaurant, the next door down. This new restaurant is called Chop Shop, it's not a Mexican chain, it's a salad chain. But on the Chop Shop menu, there are several potentially Mexican seeming items.
Also, real quick, can you just say Chop Shop like 10 times fast? Like, I just feel like
chop.
On the Chop Shop menu includes the Viva Mexico. It's got Mexico in the name. The Viva Mexico Chop Salad, which has black beans, jalapenos, tomatoes, cheddar cheese, chicken, and tortilla strips. Yum. There's the Santa Fe Chop that has avocados, corn, and pepper jack cheese. And the Cho Burrito, which is a burrito bowl with rice, beans, salsa, and your choice of up to 6 toppings. So Cafe Rio, that's the Mexican fast casual chain. They have taken Chop Shop to court. They are saying this is Mexican food you're selling and you are breaking your lease by doing it. Chop Shop, in its defense, and there are literally court filings about this now, they're saying it's a generic salad menu. Quote, the Santa Fe Chop is a salad offering that is neither Mexican nor Tex-Mex, unquote, because it doesn't have a corn or flour tortilla base. They're saying, because like a Mexican salad would have like the corn or flour tortilla bowl. And they're saying, hey, the Cho Burrito is a burrito bowl that was invented by Chipotle in Colorado like 15 years ago. There's no way it's Mexican. So this is still tied up in court. The court has not made a decision yet, but ostensibly in the near future, an American court is going to have to decide whether these foods are Mexican foods. Of course, anyone who's watching this in Mexico or of Mexico heritage is saying none of this is Mexican.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
But it also includes Tex-Mex, which is kind of that catch-all for Americanized Mexican. So Ebere, you're the judge. What do you think?
I am the judge. Okay, first of all, Steve Harvey is a judge now on his show, and I'm gonna channel him when I make my ruling right now because that show was hilarious.
Steve Harvey has a judge show?
No
Oh yeah.
idea.
I mean, it's Judge Steve Harvey, and it's a joke. I'm getting us off track, but it's very, very, very funny. And so I'm channeling him right now. I wish I had a mustache and a bald head so I could really do it.
Okay.
I would need to see I feel like, they negotiated in their lease that no other retailer could make more than 10% of sales from Mexican or Tex-Mex food. Obviously, Chop Shop is a salad chain, but the Viva Mexico, that literally says it has Mexico in the title, like you said.
Right.
Santa Fe Chop, I think you could maybe argue that that's not necessarily, like obviously we get the inspiration, but maybe you can make an argument that Santa Fe is not Mexico. Chopperito, I don't even know what to say about that. So I think I would need them to show me, what percentage of sales that they make comes from the, Viva Mexico chopped salad in particular. I think that's the only one that, well, no, Tex-Mex covers every, so Chopperito as well. I need to see how much of their total sales comes from Viva Mexico and Chopperito to determine whether or not Chop Shop is in violation of this clause. But I also wonder, as we're talking about it, Chop Shop didn't make that deal with Cafe Rio. Cafe Rio made that deal with the landlord of the space, right?
Right. So the way it works is you negotiate an exclusivity and that exclusive then goes into future leases that are signed in the center. So it's something that usually happens. It happens a lot if you're the anchor tenant and the landlord really wants to attract you. They'll say, hey, sign a lease with us. You'll be the only one selling, whatever clothing. You're the only one selling shoes, so they get a lot of exclusivity. So them being the first one to negotiate a lease, they were able to get that exclusivity. So Taylor, let's say that 10% of sales go to Viva Mexico, Santa Fe, and the Chopperito. You're the judge. Is that Mexican food?
No.
Is it Tex-Mex? I don't even think it's really Tex-Mex.
Well, which judge whispers? Whispering judge.
No.
Because I
love it.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole other discussion. Like, there's American Mexican. And again, we're just going to say American Mexican food. I think it may fall, but I think that Chop Shop could easily show, they've got a wide menu. They could show, hey, less than if 10% or more of their sales are going to Viva Mexico chopped salad, I'd be surprised.
Right.
And some of these,
you need to reassess your menu if more than 10% of your sales are going to the Viva Mexico chopped salad. So I'm just going to put that out there that I just find that very hard to believe. I agree. Show proof, to Ebere's point. Where are your sales coming from? However, I just think that.
So this is, this is a funny discussion, but I bring it up because it points to a much larger question of these exclusivity clauses. Like, why? Like, we know why landlords do it. It's just another way to entice a tenant to come to your center. We know why tenants do it because they're trying to protect their sales. I would argue the more the merrier, almost always.
I think that's my thing of Cafe Rio, this is good for you. It's not that they're selling the Mexico chopped salad or whatever it is called. You want a lively business next to you. Yeah. So that's great. That helps you. Oh, they have a long line, you get overflow. You have a long line, they get overflow. Ultimately, It is a win-win.
You want the shopping center to be the destination, not an individual restaurant. So people are like, hey, let's go down there. And whichever one has a shorter line, that's where we'll go eat. And, hey, we feel like Mexican, so we'll go there or there.
Exactly. I think it's ultimately it's less. I apologize that I did not answer the question, and it was hard for me to stay focused on the fact that I just think that it is wrong to this is good for you. So, but ultimately that's not what a good judge does. They just look at the facts, but I'm never going to be good at that. That's why I'm not a judge. But yes, to more broadly, I just think that this is good for both of you. I understand at some point, you shouldn't have 15 sushi places in your center. Like there's a, you think 15?
I would say there is a certain critical mass where you become a cluster. You think of like a jewelry district or a Little Italy, and it is, and if it's 5 to 10 generic, exactly the same sushi places, no way, it's not going to work. But one is high end, one is fast casual, one is Asian fusion. Suddenly you're the place where everybody goes for any kind of Japanese or Asian food in your town.
You have convinced me. Okay. And this is less about a, exclusive clause, but an example that I always like to say as someone who frequents the Americana, the Glendale Galleria was there first. They were very upset when the Americana was going to get built. They were like, absolutely not. This, they really fought it. This is going to, take all of our sales from our center. It has been like the best. I don't know if the Glendale Galleria would say this, but I'm going to say this with a little flourish. It's like the best thing that happened to that center. Yeah. Their sales have increased because the Americana is there. They are two centers. They're not the same owner. They're not necessarily connected. But if you exit, there's like the intersection where most people cross to get to each one. So many people are going back and forth. So again, it's just kind of this like, no, don't worry. It's not going to take your sales. It's good for you to have two good centers close to each other, work off of each other, don't fight each other.
Yeah. And again, no criticism of a retailer that's like trying to negotiate this, because in their little, in their instance, it may make more economic sense. I'm kind of talking like big picture, the overall practice, I don't think generally makes economic sense.
I really think it's if anything going to mess up the landlords having these clauses, because when I'm even in this specific example, I feel like Cafe Rio has an issue with the landlord for executing the lease with Chop Shop, right? Chop Shop didn't or may not have been aware of the exclusivity clause that Cafe Rio had already made. So I feel like maybe it's if anything a detriment to the landlords, because I imagine if Cafe Rio wins and Chop Shop has to close, if I were Chop Shop, I would then be pursuing legal action against the landlord for executing the lease in the first place. So I feel like, not only do they lose that lease, then they also have to worry about,
I mean, the exclusivities are pretty clear in the lease. Like if you sign a lease, you're going to know this really, like, this case is very narrow. It really is like them saying, hey, we're not Mexican, so we can get away with this. And the neighbor's saying, yeah, you are. But yeah, I mean, and this is such headache, just I don't know how it is around the world, but at least in the US, these kinds of clauses can cause so many issues. You might have a great tenant for your center. You want to lease there. As the retailer wants to lease there, the landlord wants you. And there's some clause that, the anchor says you can't sell X, Y, and Z, so you can't put them in there, even though everybody thinks it would be a great idea.
Yeah. I think I'm on your side, James, as far as, there might be more trouble than they're worth in the long
run. So with that, I would love to remind you guys to check out the latest episode of our Where We Buy podcast. We're talking about digital native brands that are expanding in the US. You can listen on the web at wherewebuy.show or whatever your favorite podcast app is you like to use. Check us out. Just search for Where We Buy.
Absolutely. And if you're watching us on YouTube, please be sure to hit the subscribe button and click on the little bell icon so that you're notified when new shows come out every week.
You can also follow the JLL retail page on LinkedIn. And don't worry, viewers, we will be back next week. New episode is next Thursday, 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern. You can get that on everythingweknow.show or on the JLL retail LinkedIn page.
Absolutely. So, Taylor, real quick, I'm curious, exactly how many puppies were sold in 2021?
eBay, I'll tell you all of that and the kittens next week.